Hello and welcome to a special edition of GC360, a panel of students discussing the campus climate at Georgia College. I'm Jamie Hood.
And I'm Caroline Hearn. As the semester comes to a close, the GC360 team wants to utilize our last show as a means to reflect on our campus and how we can better it.
Today we have 4 special guests.
Our first guest is Madeline Olive, president and founder of Georgia College Shelter Buddies. Madeline also serves as the Student Government Association's Director of Service Advancement.
Next, we have Cedric Norris, the Director of Multicultural Affairs for the Student Government Association and Program Assistant at the Cultural Center. He is currently leading the production of a documentary with Moon 86 Productions that portrays the discrepancies underrepresented groups experience on predominantly white college campuses.
We also have Victoria Lara here with us today. Victoria is the president of the Latino Student Association and serves on the leadership cabinet and the Student Advisory Council for the Dean of Arts and Sciences. Victoria is involved with the Black Student Alliance as well.
And last but not least, Cam Watts, a diversity peer educator, a member of the President's Student Commission on Diversity, and the chair of the Diversity and Inclusion Committee on Georgia College's Student Government. Welcome to the show, everyone. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. So before we get started, GC360 would like to take a moment to make it clear that our panelists are speaking for themselves and not for their respective organizations. We thank them very much for being here with us today.
We will also be taking questions from Facebook and Twitter. If you have questions for the panel to address, please tweet us your questions at GC360 or post them on our Facebook page, facebook.com/GC360.
We specifically want to discuss where our campus stands on diversity, and if Georgia College is a comfortable place for all people, not only in terms of race or nationality, but gender, sexual orientation, religion, age, disability, veteran status, and other factors.
All right, let's get started. In 2013, President Dorman entrusted Georgia College's Diversity Planning Action Committee with developing a diversity action plan. The goal was to achieve inclusive excellence. Now, inclusive excellence is defined as, to Georgia College, defined by practices and processes that help to assimilate diversity and quality efforts and lead to infusing diversity into recruiting and retention of faculty, staff, and students, admissions and retention processes and activities, hiring and promotion processes and systems, curriculum, creative learning experiences and scholarship, co-curricular activities, and administrative structures and practices.
So with that being said, Cedric, how do you define campus climate?
I would say that it's just the overall atmosphere that that a campus has, the overall environment, and that takes into consideration everything: the academics, the extracurricular, the student-ran organizations, the relationship with the faculty and the staff. Everything that makes a campus a campus. I would say that that's the campus climate, and I feel like it's also the things that occur on the campus, or the trends that are set on the campus, or the things that are most, prominent.
So you already touched on this a little bit, but what specifically do you think contributes to the climate? I know you were saying about like kind of the trends that were set and the way that people interact, but how do you think specifically that comes into play?
I think it comes into play by just seeing what the students do, the things that they are passionate about. And I think it also comes into play by discussing the issues that students may face on this campus.
Absolutely.
And so, diversity, that's my field, on this campus. And it's an issue that is constantly persisting, and it's something that, no one really knows the right answer to. And it's something that has a multi-view on it, and a lot of people have opinions about what they feel should change, or how we can change it, or how we can get a higher retention rate of African American and Latina and Asian students, etc. So I think a lot of things play into it, but I do think ultimately it's the responsibility of the students and the university to work with the students to ensure that everyone feels safe and included.
Absolutely.
Going off that, I just want to ask Victoria, Cedric touched on diversity and that being an issue at Georgia College. Where do you think that issue stems from?
I I think it's really like communication is the biggest thing. I think the communication from like the minority communities on campus to other like the larger majority, and even within those groups, communicating the issues that they're facing, how the students are kind of feeling, and what changes they're wanting to be made. But then also I think it's the students seeing what changes the administration is making to try to make it better. So just kind of like that link between the two.
Right. And do you think that there's any solution that we could possibly go through to recruit more of a diverse group to our campus?
Well, I think we do a really good job having the Glimpse panels and the Glimpse weekends where we kind of target like minority students and bring them to the campus, and they have tours. They have student panels that are meant to showcase like the diversity of the campus with extracurriculars. And I think those do a really good job of getting students involved and seeing like what Georgia College has to offer and how Georgia College is really making an impact to be more diverse and to give them like all the resources that they need. And especially with the new addition of like the hub, it's kind of like a command center for all of those different things.
Yeah, and I know that we're actively trying to get our diversity up, but according to the University System of Georgia, Georgia College's enrollment report is 81.3% white, 80.4% Black or African American, and 5.3% Hispanic as of the fall of 2017. So, Cameron, do you think Georgia College, with that being said, is a good place for minorities?
Well, I think that's definitely an interesting question to ask. The question is mainly about, I think, the campus climate, and this is where the difference between diversity and inclusivity becomes very apparent and relevant, I think. So when we're talking about diversity, we are talking about those statistics, what is actually different between our students. But when we're talking about inclusivity, we're talking about the campus and what our institution is really trying to accomplish. So when we're talking about Georgia College in general, I think in a large part we do a great job of really trying to include everyone and make sure that everyone has the resources that they need to really be successful and have a fantastic experience here at Georgia College. So in that way, I do think minority students would have a great time here. Is there, much room to be improved? Yes, absolutely. I'm 100% behind that. But we also need more diverse minority students to come to the campus to help improve that climate as well. So I think it's definitely more so relevant to the person themselves as they come here. So does Georgia College really fit you as a person, not necessarily your racial group or your sexual orientation or anything revolving around that?
And Madeline, do you agree with that? Like, what are your views? Do you think Georgia College is a good place for minorities?
I definitely think that within Georgia College, I think SGA and the school itself and the administration is very receptive to hearing issues. If there are any issues, SGA had a town hall meeting this semester that unfortunately wasn't as broadcast PR-wise, but we did have a few students come forward, especially one student who brought up some issues within Georgia College and handicap accessibility. And Mike was super receptive to that, and that's another, minority group that we don't necessarily think about, and I know Georgia College really needs to work on handicap accessibility. So I think that's awesome that we're trying to work towards giving students more opportunities to be able to have their voice be heard. And I think, with the administration, they need to hear about the issues so that they can fix it, and they want to listen and they want to help.
And Cedric, to you, same question. Do you think Georgia College is a good place for minorities? Why or why not?
I think it's a good and a bad place. I think it's good in the sense that it offers someone a perspective of needing to feel as if work needs to be done, and I think that's a great way of giving students an inclination of actually doing work and creating programs and starting things and setting traditions and things like that. So when you give them an incentive to do so, but I do think it's bad in the sense of our education and the aspects of furthering and putting action behind all of the paperwork and all of the action plans that we have. They're action plans, but it's very rarely where you see the action behind them.
Right.
Absolutely.
And I think they're rarely advertised as something that is for everyone. So I do think there are some bad qualities to it, but I think when you are a minority in a predominantly white area where people don't look like you, it does give you some communication skills as to how to maneuver through life, or how to have conversations that may be uncomfortable, or how to be intentional in being an active listener and being able to be just, just aware of things around you.
So, Victoria, how do you think we can remedy that issue? Because, as Cedric kind of touched on, there are some, positives for being a minority on the Georgia College campus, but it can also be hard being a minority on the Georgia College campus. How do you think, what steps do you think we could take to make that a little less painful?
I think it's definitely a two-way street. I think that other students need to be, and the administration needs to be receptive, which, as we've kind of all said, they are willing to listen, willing to try to make these changes. But as Cedric said, a lot of times it's a lot of talk and no action. So I think that that's kind of where the frustration comes from for a lot of minority students that have been here for a while, that they see the issues and they're not seeing as quick of a change as they would like. So, but I think it's also on the part of the students to understand that this is a gradual process. It's something, you're talking about changing a whole campus climate. And so obviously that takes time. But I think if we all kind of pitch in together and kind of get on this collaborative page of this is kind of what we want Georgia College to be, Georgia College as a community, we can really make changes with that.
Absolutely.
And Kim, to reply to that, how do you feel about the issue and how we could possibly remedy it?
Right, so I think Victoria put it very nicely that yes, the university is very receptive and willing to listen to a lot of the qualms that our student body has with diversity issues, but there does seem to be a lack of action, I think. And a lot of times that's just because the university is catering to a student body, and so we are actually kind of the bosses in a lot of sense. So I think in a lot of ways the action needs to kind of stem from the students at first. So that's why kind of with student government, that's the kind of angle that we're trying to take. So we're trying to spearhead some of these programs and really actually write legislation that's promoting certain initiatives that we think would really help, create a better campus climate for all students. Yeah. So I think really anything that the students can do to show that this is a priority for them and that this is really where we want to take our university. I think that's going to really promote a lot of action on the administrative side of things. Absolutely. And that's going to stem a lot of the change that we're looking for.
Yeah, and I know that the administrative has been pretty they've responsive. I'm not figuring out the word. Has been pretty responsive in terms of, the problems that we have here. Madeline, is there any change that has already happened? What actions have we already taken, and not just talk, but what have you seen on this campus that has changed?
I know specifically within the Give Center, school-wide, it's always been more females to males in that ratio. And I think it's starting to even out within the few years. I'm a senior, so I've definitely noticed more of an even ratio. But specifically with this freshman class in the Give Center, we have had so many males come in and register as volunteers and try to get involved with service groups, which I think is amazing because especially within the Give Center, it has been predominantly female. Right. So I think, again, it's with the student body, we have to take the action. And I think, whatever is with this freshman class that wants to get involved with service, that's amazing. I hope, it continues, because that is kind of an issue that the Give Center has faced, is how do we get men more involved with service?
Yeah, definitely.
Just into a more personal question, how many of you personally feel like you've been discriminated against? You can even just give a show of hands.
I mean, I have. I've ran into instances where, where people have said things. There was a particular instance where I was even asked to leave from a party, which I think was like the first week of my freshman year. So I was here and like horrified. I was like, oh my God, why did I come here? But I think it's also just important to like look at the historical aspect of Georgia College. And during my time as diversity and inclusion chairman, when I was a senator last year, I did take a look at the history and the reports from even 5, 6, 10 years ago. And Georgia College has not always been this, has not always had this struggle And it was actually a lot of my black counterparts that encouraged me to come here because they were alumni of this institution. And so looking at the reports, this has not always been an issue, you know. I think just recently, because of the way that recruitment is being handled, the way that, you know, the route that admissions is going and things of that nature, you know, a lot of people are from the metro Atlanta area, and you see a lot of people who come from a very similar socioeconomic background and status. And so I think you know, a lot of them grow up a certain way. And so I would say that the campus climate is essentially conservative. And I think a lot of people associate liberal arts with being liberal in a political sense, and that's not, that is an entire different, you know, realm of things. But you know, I think, and that's a struggle because you're in college and you're battling different views and things like that, and you're having to have discussions that you normally wouldn't have outside of your bubble of life with your parents and things like that. So, you know, but as I've been discriminated against or experienced microaggressions or somewhat aggressive behavior or racial slurs or things like that, I've chose to use that constructively to educate the majority so that they may be aware of the minority.
So I know you just kind of touched on it a little bit, but more specifically, how did you get past that? Because to be in your first week of your freshman year of college, that's a terrible thing to have to happen. So how, like, I know now once you've gotten involved and you can use that energy into something more positive and use it into educating, but initially, how did you get past that?
Initially, I was angry, and I think you go through a process, and there's this theory in sociology that is called the racial identity scale, and it kind of gives you a layout of how white people form their racial identity and how black people form their racial identity. And so I think at some point I was there on that scale where I was like pseudo-independent, where there were issues that I had, and I was aware of the changes that needed to be made, but I really didn't know how to, you know, address it, or I didn't really know how to get past it. And so I think with time, you know, it heals all wounds. So I think with time, I was angry at first, but I decided to take that and try to help people.
And Cameron and Madeline, when we were talking about if you had experienced discrimination, you guys are both in the majority, obviously, and I personally haven't experienced any discrimination. I'm not sure if either of you had specifically, but if not, what do you think we can do? How would you handle the situation that Cedric was in? Have you seen anything?
Yeah, well, I've definitely been kind of working around in this space for the last couple of years, and I'm really glad you asked this question because, yeah, I am part of the majority, pretty much as majority as you can get, probably. But I think one of the issues is that I haven't been discriminated against. A lot of my friends haven't been, so it, you know, kind of is not in our immediate mindset all the time. So it's hard to you know, give a lot of weight, I think, if you're not thinking about things. So definitely, I think really recognizing that there are a lot of, you know, not pleasant things going on our campus, even today. I know Cedric mentioned something that happened to him a couple years ago, but I've definitely heard some horror stories from, you know, this year from a lot of my friends, other diversity peer educators, just other students that I've had the chance to talk to. So there's definitely a lot of room for improvement, especially just between students as they're interacting and between faculty and students as well. So I think really being able to recognize that there still is a lot of microaggressions that are going on, but also like blatant racism that is just occurring even on our, you know, small campus here in Milledgeville. So really understanding that and making sure that you're not being, you know, a part of that yourself is a huge first step.
You mentioned you had heard some horror stories specifically, and don't name any names, but could you give us any examples?
Well, let's see. I do know a friend of mine who, well, I'll talk about the one story of the token black person in, you know, the history class where you're going through, you know, the Civil War period, and you're talking about slavery, and everyone turns to the one black person in the room to get their comment on the issue, and that's just not okay, because they're not responsible for speaking for the entire black race or African American community, and that apparently I've heard that story multiple times from multiple people. So that's one way that it happens in the classroom. Another way is talking about our early college program on campus. Yes, the early college program is predominantly of underrepresented students from the local high school, and there have been many cases where Georgia College students have called them very racist words, N-word, all these things, and so that's happened very recently too. So that's flat out right in the open air, just walking around on campus. So it's here, and it needs to change. So yeah.
Madeline, kind of off what Cam said previously about some of the issues that people that could potentially be in the majority aren't even aware or possibly even thinking that it's an issue because it's not something they deal with personally. How do you feel that people that are in the majority or other students in general could become more open-minded or more aware of the situation?
I think definitely open-mindedness, and even if you don't personally experience it, someone else is obviously experiencing this, and you can't deny their experience. And so just have an open-mindedness and be willing to listen. And I think too, as a majority, being more conscious of the language that we use, because language is extremely powerful, and there's certain ways that you can say things, like microaggression or micro-racism, that kind of thing. Just being more conscious of that, because I think little things such as language can make a big impact and make a big difference. And also, I as uncomfortable as it is, I don't think you should be afraid to call out people for doing certain things. Like if someone were to use the R word, that's not okay. And there's a certain way that you can call them out, call them out. There's a certain way that you can talk to them about their use of language and make it, I guess, more of an educational and learning experience rather than just fuel the fire even more kind of thing.
Victoria, is there anything specifically that you think we can do to help and to make people not only more aware, but to take action to ensure that it doesn't continue happening?
Well, I think that everyone has kind of made all great points about education being the key piece and open-mindedness to that education being a key piece. Because I haven't had any personal experiences, but being part of BSA and LSA, there are people who are my friends and close to me that have. And I think Cedric made a good point and Cam made a good point about it, about taking those experiences and using them constructively to educate, and for using it for the majority to see that this isn't something that happens. It doesn't have to be a big scandal necessarily to happen. It's the lived experience of people that are on our campus. So I think with organizations like BSA and LSA, we're really trying to, I guess, showcase that and show that I'm trying to think how to say this, that we aren't necessarily angry, but that we want to use it to move forward and to keep moving forward with the community. So we have events LSA recently had a Living Like Latinos panel where we shared our experience living like Latinos as through our life, and also how that changed coming to the Georgia College campus and the big culture shock of it being a predominantly white campus. And we used that, and a lot of people came that weren't just Latinos, and I think that they learned a lot and took a lot from it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think especially having places where you can be open and have an open conversation about it is incredibly important. Are there any other organizations that all of you are involved in that you think are opening up that conversation? Cedric, do you have any?
Other than the Black Student Alliance, which I think they're really making efforts to reconstruct themselves lately. So and also freshman year, the theater department does a great job of setting aside a specific time every year to do a main stage production that cast that has a predominantly black cast. And usually those stories are very are part of history, and essentially changed history. And I know this year they had Detroit 67, last year they had Stick Fly, and the year that I acted in it, we did Emmett Till. And so I think a lot of that sometimes is looked by the wayside, but those efforts are being made, and the the President's Commission on Diversity and things like that, actually being able to talk to Dr. Dorman is helpful also.
Yeah. So we'd now like to offer each panelist the opportunity to pose a question for the rest of the panel to discuss. Madeline, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but if you would like to start, if you have any questions you think would be helpful to talk about.
So I mentioned this at the beginning that, the Gift Center is predominantly female. I was wondering if y'all had any kind of thoughts or ideas of how we can get men more involved within community service and within the Gift Center.
I feel like collaborating with like maybe the fraternities would be a big push, since they already kind of do philanthropy. You could kind of connect with them through what they're already doing and get more involvement that way potentially.
Definitely, and just to throw this out there, even if you aren't a service group but you're doing a service-based project, you can use the resources in the Gift Center. It's not just for predominantly service groups. If like the Latino Association wanted to do something service-based or fundraising-based, you can come into the Gift Center and use all our resources. And we have a lot of different things that, with starting my own service group, and we didn't qualify for SABC funding until this year, and I know how hard that is to do certain events and not have funding. The Gift Center kind of helps make up for some of that. You can hold like meetings and stuff like that in the Gift Center.
I think maybe also sending representatives to like the right at the beginning of the year, sending them to those organizational meetings, or even after shortly after fraternity recruitment, sending your ladies and gentlemen into those spaces and like letting them know that they have that opportunity to do so, because I must say that since I've entered the fraternal world, I've been very surprised at the efforts that people have for philanthropic activities.
And I don't know if this would be specifically for men, but I do know that we do University Student Council, I think bi-monthly now, or something like that, but really like making sure that we're educating the presidents of the resident or registered student organizations on campus about what resources the Gift Center has and how those can be used, even if you're not a student or a service organization. I think that might be a cool thing to do.
Definitely.
Victoria, do you have a question you'd like to pose?
Well, I guess like most of you, well, all of you actually, are on student government, and so I'm just now kind of learning all of these different things that the administration is doing, and I think it's made like a huge impact in how like LSA kind of starts doing their things. We definitely have like a different attitude with how we're doing things and trying to educate more people about that. So how do you guys think that you can, I guess, like advertise the efforts that you guys are doing to the rest of the student body more?
Well, actually, the Student Government Association just passed a new resolution in which each committee is creating a strategic report about the projects that we're working on, and then we're going to publicize that on our website. So students and administration will be able to look at those reports and see exactly what initiatives, what projects that we're working on. So that includes the Diversity and Inclusion Committee, in which you can see that yes, we just wrote a resolution promoting scholarships for diverse students that we're going to be able to use through a university advancement to really help recruit donors to provide more scholarship money for something like that. We're also creating a newsletter strictly for inclusive events, so that we're really promoting and highlighting these events on campus, because I know PR and just word getting these events known to everybody on campus is another issue that we're working on. Then there's another project that we're working on, really working with Early College Student Council to help develop a better relationship and rapport between the two organizations. So you'll be able to go on our website and see each initiative that we're working on, who's responsible for that initiative, and then also like what step of the process we are in getting that filled out. So I think that's definitely a way to kind of see what's going on. And then I also, I think the Diversity Action Plan, through the Office of Inclusive Excellence, they'll be starting the public side of the Diversity Action Plan, in which they're going to start publicizing the things that they've done over the past few years and also what they still plan to do. So I definitely think the transparency needs to increase, especially around this issue, so that everybody is being held more accountable for the actions that they're proposing, making sure that those are actually going on. So yes, those are some of the things going on.
I also think that the use of, like, I think if we were to be able to use University Student Council, which is basically like a home base for all organizational presidents to come and meet each other, and being able to send out representatives who are knowledgeable on the efforts that are being made on behalf of the university and the students as far as diversity and inclusivity goes, and sending those people out and letting them know what's happening, because they are the spearheads of their organizations, and so they can go back and relay that information. And encouraging them to, send things to our press secretary under SGA, so that he or she may be able to advertise whatever is going on. And then something else that I think would help a lot too is the use of research in social science, and just being able to, this past semester I conducted a participant observation research, which was a semester-long thing where we took field notes and sat and observed people, and people really didn't even know we were observing them. But conducting that research in an ethical way, and using that student research as a way of making a next step.
Absolutely. I think that's an incredible idea, to be able to get that raw data from the students. Is there any follow-up questions that you have for the panel to talk about specifically what you can do with that information?
No.
No. Cameron, do you have any questions that you would like to pose?
The only question I'll ask is a quick shout out to the diversity peer educators, because while we're not an organization, we are under the Office of Inclusive Excellence, and we go into freshman seminar classes, or at least that's what we've done this past semester, and lead facilitations and discussions and activities about identity, diversity, and inclusivity, especially on campus, trying to educate this incoming class so that it can spread throughout the entire campus. But what are some things, I guess, that you would like seen taught more? Like what specific subjects would be really cool to teach, especially as we're going into another semester where we're going to have greater flexibility to kind of address specific issues on campus.
I said before, I think definitely the impact of language and using it, and it can go as far as using certain words that you maybe used in high school because you're a little immature and that's kind of what you heard, or even just something as simple as using preferred pronouns for people, because that's such a small, easy thing, and it just takes minimal conscious effort to make that person feel better because that's what they prefer. And I think that's really important to get that conversation going, because we do have several students on campus who are maybe transgender or non-binary or prefer certain pronouns. And I think it's important to respect that too, and respect those individuals.
And I also think, I'm going to piggyback off the language aspect, but I also think the use of just motivation. Motivational speakers are when you get the right one and you give them a topic on what they need to speak on, I think if you utilize that, especially with us being young adults, seeing someone who's not that much older than us who can motivate us and educate us at the same time and be enthusiastic about it is, I think, a very good tactic to use. And I think that's something that I've just seen, and learned throughout sociology and psychology. When you give people an incentive to learn, whether that be through motivation or positivity or anything, they're more inclined to take a stance on something or make a change.
Yeah, I definitely agree with both of them. I think when you think of diversity, you immediately kind of go to racial diversity, but there's so much more to it, and I would like to see more education on all of those different things, like non-normative gender identities. Madeline brought up the handicap accessibility, so learning about different things like that, I think, would help the minority community support one another and give a foundation and just help us learn about all of the different types of diversity that there are.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and Victoria was talking about how a lot of times when you think of diversity, the first thing that you go to is race or sexual affiliation or things like that. But one thing that has been pretty prominent lately is the political diversity. So, Madeline, how do you view the campus and the students' political views? Like, do you think there's a big divide? I know it's through that one.
Personally, I consider myself more of like a moderate liberal, and I definitely think there is like a strong conservative force on campus, and it's definitely difficult. I think, especially as we are all young adults, and this is the first time that we're really away from our parents, so we're figuring out what our own political identity is without the influence of our parents and family, and so it's a little bit of a confusing time because, you know, you also are trying to figure out who you are as a person, again, because you're with that outside influence, and I think more than anything in college, your friends influence you. So I would definitely say we are a pretty conservative college as a whole, and I definitely do think we do have some pretty liberal people. I even know a few communists. And I think one thing that I always like to credit Georgia College on is critical thinking. You know, that's everyone's GC1Y is critical thinking. I had a really awesome one. It was psychological ethics and learning kind of how to dissect different news sources, you know, dissect different info. So like, you know, it's kind of hard to watch the news and kind of learn things from that because you never know how accurate it is or how biased. And I think just, again, that open-mindedness of even if you are pretty liberal, maybe listen to the conservative side and then base your opinion before, you know, see all sides of the issues and spectrums of things before you make your decision and make it more intentional.
And Cameron, what about you? Do you see a strong divide?
Yes. I'm gonna say we're pretty representative of the United States as a whole right now, in that we have pretty prominent members of both sides of the political spectrum, but the moderates are kind of hiding in the middle, not really engaging in the conversation, I think. I'm actually part of the American Democracy Project, which is the only nonpartisan political organization on campus. And so we try to bring in both sides of an issue, both sides, experts, not necessarily experts, but just students with perspectives from both Republicans, Democrats, Libertarians, so we can engage in kind of a dialogue about the issues going on. I do think that a lot of the campus is not really engaging as much as they should, especially in this, crazy political time that we're going through. So, I would say we're pretty representative of the United States as a whole.
Yeah, Cedric, you're nodding your head like you have a lot of feelings.
It is definitely interesting for sure. This is just an ongoing debate that I have with a lot of people. And I think a lot of times it stems from their home life because their parents associate them going to a liberal arts school. Their parents or grandparents or some relative associate them because they go to a liberal arts school. They think that a lot of the political agenda and a lot of the conversations are very liberal minded and in a political sense. And I'm like, no, that is so wrong. That's not true. I would say we're a conservative campus. We are a campus. Statistics show and data supports that people from this socioeconomic status that Georgia College predominantly represents, these people are, they associate with a conservative political stance, and that's fine. But to give that false information of we're divided. And there was a strong sense of it, and I think during the election, you could see that, people were either this way or that way. And and I mean, it's fine. I think it's healthy for discussion. But I do think that it sometimes can hinder us because of the overwhelming conservative presence when we're trying to advocate for diversity.
And Victoria, do you have a response on this?
I think they pretty much summed it up, but I would say I agree with everyone that there is a divide. There is a large group of people that are kind of in the middle, trying to figure out where they kind of align on the different issues. I'm guilty of that. Sorry, Cam. But I think that when it comes down to it, the political climate kind of informs our campus climate at times, depending on like what's going on in the politics. So like particularly during the election, our campus was very divided on the issues, and it affected kind of how people were feeling in the day-to-day. So I guess like while there is a divide, I think it's important for us to have that open dialogue to be able to kind of like still address our day-to-day lives and not burn bridges
For
over
sure.
it.
Well, thank you guys so much for all taking your time to talk about all of this. I think there were a lot of issues and a lot of solutions that we've come across, and you guys are all doing incredible work with your organizations to try and make positive change on this campus. So thank you so much, because it doesn't go underappreciated. I know a lot of people don't know what happens, behind closed doors and in little club rooms about, what actually goes into making Georgia College what Georgia College is. But it's incredible what all of you are doing. So thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
And thank you as well, informing us personally. I know you informed me on a lot today, so thank you for that. GC360 will post the panel show on our website, gc360news.com, and on all our social media platforms. And remember to tune in for our replay times at noon, 5 p.m., and 9 p.m. For GC360, I'm Jamie Hood.
And I'm Caroline Hearn. See you next time.